Senate Education Committee meeting. At this time, I'll ask, are there any bill introductions? Seeing none, we will move forward on the agenda. At this time, committee, I am wanting us to consider taking final action on Senate Bill 340. And so we'll start with just a brief overview from our reviser. Thank you for being with us today, Tamara.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, committee. If you'll remember, Senate Bill 340 is the bill that amends the Kansas Promise Scholarship Program. And the last time the committee addressed this bill, you did adopt 5 balloons. The first one was the technical amendment that I had put together to make several corrections for things that were inadvertently not corrected in the bill before it got introduced. The second balloon clarified the definition of promise-eligible program to ensure that those programs are high-wage, high-demand, critical need. The third balloon required the Board of Regents to establish in rules and regulations that no institution may limit scholarship awards to certain programs or award less than the full amount for which the student qualifies. The next balloon that was adopted was clarifying the section regarding institution designating a field of study as opposed to a program for those scholarship awards. And the last balloon that the committee adopted was capping that award at $20,000 in addition to the cap that's already in the bill for the amount of credit hours. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Committee, are there any questions for the reviser? Seeing none at this time, I will ask, are there any additional amendments? Senator Straub, you have a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe the last time we worked this, we had potentially talked about putting a sunset on it or a max award amount, just to, I think, help give us some type of reporting period that we can review and see if this program has done what we anticipated it would do, and if not, we could potentially make adjustments at that time.
Correct. That was a discussion item. In fact, Senator Suellentrop had discussed that and was going to work with the reviser. We'll wait and see if that's actually him. Nope, it's JG. Thank you for being with us today. I did receive, as the chair, I received an email from Senator Suellentrop that he was withdrawing the notion of making an amendment. And part of that is because he did go back and read through the bill itself that indicated all of what was required to be reported to the legislature on an annual basis. We also know that because of built into the bill is that quarterly, every 3 months, funding is going to the institutions based on actual enrollment, that data will be collected on a quarterly basis and it be available on a quarterly basis. And I do want to add, I didn't bring my printed copy. I think our committee assistant could share with us. We do have the updated report. How many pages is it? It's 95 pages. So here is the Kansas Promise Act, Kansas Promise Scholarship Act. Here is actually the first report. And each of you did receive that. We received it today from the Board of Regents. And Cindy did send that to every single one of you. So that is in here. My assistant is out today, so that's probably why. So your assistant will print it out for you, but you will all have that. And so, Senator Petty, did you have a question or a comment?
Madam Chair, I totally agree with you. I think that I didn't print out the report. I perused it earlier today, but I think that there's plenty of evidence there that we're getting a lot of information as these scholarships are awarded at the various institutions.
Now, I can add that, is there a point in time where we need to put an actual cap? For the time being, that cap will be made in appropriations. because it's only going to be the funds that are appropriated. What the legislation does say at this time, that for this next year, that cap will be at the $10 million, just like it is $10 million for this year. And from that point forward, it's going to be more than appropriate. We did hear from the Board of Regents that if we want to put a monetary cap, if we want to put a percentage cap, they are absolutely comfortable with that. They see that that is legislative prerogative. So let's say next year, when the second report is here, if we want to, in this committee, or if the House wants to, put a sunset or put a funding cap or go testify with Ways and Means, all of those are options that we certainly can have. But right now, that's why I did ask if we had any amendments. And so it would need to come from one of you, because Senator Solentrop had already indicated that he would not have an amendment. So I'm not seeing any amendments. So we are at the point now with Senate Bill 340, and there's the man of the hour. Do I have a motion to pass out Senate Bill 340 as amended? Oh, I have another question, Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And maybe Heather Morgan might answer this, but as part of defining those field of study areas, those core field of study areas that have a shortage of staffing and high need and high salary, do we have a percentage of the open jobs in that area that are not filled? Like, do we have a benchmark to go from so that we can identify something now, so that when we review this in a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever, that we can tell what kind of progress we have or haven't made?
At this time, I'll call on Heather Morgan. Obviously, if someone from the Board of Regents wants to speak to that, that's fine.
Essentially, what we can do through Kansas Department of Labor data, we could pull what the percentage of openings is now and what the percentage of openings is in the future. However, because there are so many openings, not every opening is getting posted, because there may be 5 openings for one position. So there's not a perfect way to do it, but when we look at what's high wage, high demand, and critical need, we'll be looking at Perkins needs assessments, which are different for each college, so that it may be a regional need in Southwest Kansas, it might not be a need in Johnson County, and those are all informed by our industry advisory board. So this will be the partnership between the Department of Commerce, the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, KBOR, the colleges, local industry, to make sure that we continually review and keep the most high wage, high demand, and critical need occupations, getting the scholarship going forward, and that things that are no longer high wage, high demand, and critical need are no longer funded.
Did you have a follow-up question? Okay.
Is that part of the reporting requirements as it's currently written in the bill?
It's not a part of the reporting requirements, but what we anticipate is we have the deadline that's set in the bill for the rules and regulations that the Board of Regents will come up with for the Promise Scholarship. And so I anticipate that's something that we'll be seeing as far as how, from a regulation standpoint, they will be using that data to circle around and continue to review the certificate or the degree programs that are being offered under those different categories. So if we could have someone from the Board of Regents verify that that's their intention. Please identify yourself.
Hello, Blake Flanders, Board of Regents. We have a robust process here to determine, what's critical need, what's high wage, high demand, using those data that Heather Morgan talked about. I would tell you, just in terms of evaluation, at times we say, is the program doing well? We're going to look at number of graduates, but at times, sometimes you don't want the gap totally closed. In other words, if manufacturing is continuing to expand and you're producing more, but there continues to be a shortage, that's not always a bad thing. I've also been in an economy where there weren't any shortages, and that's not necessarily a good thing. So as you look at those evaluations, we're going to have graduates in there. We'll also have a robust process on identifying those specific programs that should be eligible for the Promise Act, and programs within the fields that are designated. So I'm really comfortable with that part of the process.
Any further questions? So now we'll go back to, do I have a motion to pass out Senate Bill 340 as amended? I do, from Senator Dietrich.
Madam Chair, I move that we pass out Senate Bill 340 as amended.
Okay, do I have a second? I have a second from Senator Petty. Is there any discussion on this motion that's been approved and seconded? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Senate Bill 340 as amended passes out. Now we're going to turn to Senate Bill 215. And so let's have a brief summary, though we did talk about this last week. We had the hearing this last week. Let's have a brief summary from our reviser. And then she was asked during the hearing to prepare an amendment for us that came up in the hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate Bill 215 would transfer the State Board of Education's authority for driver training schools and the State Board of Regents authority for post-secondary driver education programs to the Department of Revenue.
We're not going to require a wait for the amendment because it's already prepared, and our reviser was gracious enough to give us hard copies. Thank you so much. So we'll just ask the reviser if you can please go through the technical amendments as well as the language that was requested in the hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate Bill 215 was initially requested and introduced during the 2021 session. And because of that, there were several dates contained in the bill that needed to be updated either to 2021 sub-references or from July 1, 2021 to July 1, 2022. So that's the technical amendment. I believe there are 4 date changes. You can see those. It's just changing 2020 to 2021 or 2021 to 2022. And then on page 1 of the balloon, you see that additional box. This was made at the request of the representative from Johnson County Community College to add the phrase, "and any community college conducting an approved course in driver training" to section 1. So it would become it would be allowed to participate in the state safety fund. And that is the balloon.
Are there any questions? Yes, we'll start with Senator Dietrich.
Thank you. And how will that dilute the state safety fund? I don't know the total dollars that are in there now, but if we add the community college's ability to participate in that state safety fund, I'm just wondering if we'll end up with not having enough dollars in that fund.
Okay, I think at this time, I'm going to call on John Hess to talk about that. And I think we need to be careful about diluting, using that term simply because the students that are attending for the most part at the institution are high school students because the school districts have stopped providing that. So rather than going to the high school, the school districts that used to provide that service, they're not providing that service. So you have the same student population, but where they receive the instruction is changing.
Madam Chair, if I may, not every high school has stopped teaching driver's ed.
Correct.
Just some.
Some, exactly.
Thank you.
John, if you would go ahead and introduce yourself and then talk to us about what is the size of the fund.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is John Hess, the Director of Fiscal Services for the Kansas State Department of Education. Currently, so since about 2012, there have been about 11,500 to 12,000 high school students enrolled in courses provided by at public schools or and approved courses at accredited non-public schools. Based on the data that we could pull, and so this is not exhaustive, there are about 900, there were for fiscal year 20, 900, and fiscal year 21, 1,000 total students enrolled in the one community college driver's ed program, which is at Johnson County Community College. Now, I would note that is inclusive of all students, so that does capture some students who are above the age of 18. And so based on the data that we have at the State Department, the best we could determine that it was about 814 high school age students at community colleges in fiscal year 20 and 905 in fiscal year 21. And so that would have the effect, and the way state aid is calculated, sorry to dive into the weeds, is school districts and accredited non-public schools report their enrollment for the previous year in the fall, and then it's audited throughout the year. And so we pay, and then the payment is made, and we pay based on the prior year's enrollment. And so if you add that, and so you get a per pupil amount, and the amount is just kind of what is available in terms of revenue from the state safety fund. That is a percentage of driver's license renewals, and revenue, even though it is on we've been on the 6-year cycle for driver's licenses for a while, there's still a 2-year period where it dips down from the old 4-year cycle, then comes back up. This is really in the weeds, I apologize. But all of that results in a per pupil amount. So in fiscal year 20, it was about $130 is what we paid out. And in fiscal year 21 was about $102. And so if you included K-12 students only from community colleges, that would go down to about $121 and $91 respectively. If you included all students at community colleges, it would be about $120 and $90 respectively. So it would decrease the per pupil amount a little bit, but it's about 800 and 900 K-12 students who are at community colleges driver ed courses right now.
Do you have a follow-up question, Senator?
That was
Senator Dietrich?
really in the weeds, John.
My apologies, Madam Chair, Senator.
If I may summarize what I think I heard you say, is that the dollar amount would be somewhat minimal based on the per pupil dollars that have been funded in the past.
Yes, Madam Chair, Senator. So it would if you had went back and added the K-12 or the students at community colleges, it would bring the per pupil dollar amount down a little bit, but at $9 to $11.
Not significantly. Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, John. Good to see you. Okay.
And John used to sit right there.
Yes, he did. So, John, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this from someone who's, been in a school setting and seen driver's ed come and go. So how many students statewide take driver's ed that are reimbursed through this program, through the safety fund?
Madam Chair, Senator, in 2021, so what we paid out in fiscal year 2021, which means that was school year 20, was 8,027. That was down significantly because of COVID. We're anticipating it to go up. So in fiscal year 2020, it was a little over 11,000. And it's been about 11,500 to 12,000 for the better part of a year, or for a decade. The vast majority of those students are at public schools, and there's a handful that are at accredited non-public schools that have authorized or approved driver's training courses.
So that was I got the figures of fiscal year 20 was $130 per pupil. So that's the total across the state that this is coming out of, correct?
Yes, Madam Chair and Senator. So there is about $130 per pupil in fiscal year 2020. So that's a total of $1.4 million.
Okay. So when I took driver's ed, when my kids took driver's ed, we paid for driver's ed. We paid a fee. Is there any fee that students pay for, or does this cover the entire, what's the cost of a student to take driver's education?
Madam Chair, Senator, that would depend on the situation, whether or not that if that student took driver's ed at school, it would be up to the individual school districts to determine what fee, if any, would be applicable in that situation. So that'd be on a case-by-case basis, and I think there are about 230 school districts now that are offering driver's ed programs. I'd have to pull up some files to double check, but I believe that's the rough number. And then, of course, it's also possible for a student to take a driver's ed course at a, we call it a commercial driving school, but, you know, not a CDL, just they pay someone outside the school to take driver's education.
Madam Chair, if I may.
You may.
And the students who choose to take it with a commercial non-school program, they don't receive any funding.
Madam Chair, Senator, not based on current law, they do not receive that funding. The funding for the State Safety Fund is for programs, current language is for programs operated by school districts and accredited non-public schools.
And final, if I may. So, John, I was around when some schools dropped driver's ed. Do you know why they dropped driver's education out of public schools or the schools that I'm familiar with?
Madam Chair, Senator, I can't speak to individual school districts. I can look at the data in terms of enrollment, and the precipitous drop occurred around the Great Recession. So prior to the Great Recession, you had over 15,000 and closer to 20,000 students around the state enrolled in driver's education, but it was around the Great Recession is when the drop happened.
Yes, Madam Chair, and I remember it well, and it was because school districts were no longer able to make money off of driver's education, so a lot of them dropped their programs. So, okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I understand this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions, committee? Do I have a motion to accept this amendment? Senator Petty.
I'll make a motion to accept the amendment that's on the floor.
Okay. Do I have a second? I have a second from Senator Sykes. Is there any discussion about the amendment? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Okay, I believe a majority have said aye, so it does pass. I heard one opposition. So now we are on the base bill as amended. Are there any additional questions about this? Yes, Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So initially we were talking about the amendment, and now we're back on the bill, correct?
We are back.
That's the question that I wanted to ask. It seems pretty, easy to understand, but yet I'm still confused. So it seems like all we are really saying is that we are wanting to changing how the community colleges are not funded, but how the terminology for that, they're already funded now, correct?
They do, for the training that they provide students for driver's ed, it is not like SB 155. It's not like a concurrent enrollment. It is simply that the parents pay the tuition and there is no funding that goes to the community colleges. This bill was designed at the request of several different agencies. So we had the Department of Education, we had the Board of Regents, and we had the Department of Revenue that thought it would be easiest to have all of this under one house, and that would be the Department of Revenue. Okay. So all of this process of that driver's education and the licensure would be under the Department of Revenue.
Okay, well,
So
that's what I understood it was about when it was first introduced, but then we've had lots of discussions about funding the community college, so.
That is only under the component that the Department of Education, in their evaluation of this, put the community colleges under the category of commercial, not under an educational. And I think what we heard from Mr. Hess was that that the recipients from the state safety fund in the past have all been from accredited school districts as well as accredited private institutions. So the K through 12 privates. Mr. Hess, do you want to come and just make sure that we're accurate in that? Okay.
Madam Chair, that is correct. So currently, community colleges get funding for motorcycle safety courses and commercial driver safety courses. Those are in other statutes that are included in the bill but not amended, or only slightly amended to reflect the transfer over to the Department of Revenue. Previously, they did not receive funding for regular driver's education courses.
And this bill would give them that funding?
Madam Chair, Senator, as amended now, they would receive funding as part of that. So they would have to report their, as part of that, they'd have to report their enrollment in the previous school year to the Department of Education, and the Department of Education would include them in the calculations of state aid and then send out voucher payments to the community, any community colleges requesting to participate in the state aid program.
Mr. Hess, that would only be for high school age students.
Madam Chair, as I believe as it's currently drafted, it could be the current amendment, it could be any student, because I believe it just says, but I'm not a lawyer, so I would defer to the revisers on that. But I believe it just says student participating in the program, but I don't know if there's somewhere else where it defines student as a K-12 age student.
Senator Erickson, you have a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it is for John, if you'll stand, John. So I'm going to age myself a little bit. When I took driver's ed, it was a summer program that you signed up for when you were old enough, and it was quite the social activity and excitement around it. But I do know that some school districts went to offering driver's education as a class during the day. Do we know how many school districts that currently offer driver's education do it during the day as an elective versus the summer type program? And the reason I ask is it seems if they're offering it as an elective during the day, they're getting an FTE for that, or the community college would be getting tuition for that then on top of this reimbursement. I just want to make sure I'm following this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, Senator, we would have to go and look at our data to see how see if we collect what type of class, like whether it's elective or it's a summer or something like that. That's not something I have readily available.
Okay, and I'm pretty certain, but we could get clarification from the community college. I'm pretty certain those are just weekend and evening courses, not during the daytime, except for in the summer. Senator Gossage, I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my confusion then is that really this is about transferring this over to the Department of Revenue, but also giving funding to community colleges who were not receiving funding before for offering these classes. Am I right on that?
Yes, because they were put under the category of commercial because the Department of Education doesn't have oversight over the community colleges.
And so they're wanting to be put back or stay under commercial? Sorry, forgive me, I'm
No, they're wanting to be recognized as a educational institution, and they would under the Department of Revenue.
okay. So I have to go along with what Senator Erickson was saying in that I too remember, I mean, all of my children took it as part of their elective. You just selected driver's ed, it was part of your curriculum.
During the daytime?
During the daytime.
I know that there are some school districts that do that. So obviously, we need some more information from the Department of Education, because as what I'm perceiving is they are getting at least a half a credit, because I think if it's in the public schools during the daytime, it's one semester, not a full year. Mr. Hess, do you happen to know?
Madam Chair, that's correct. It would be one semester.
Okay, so that would be a half a credit. So there would be the funding for the half of credit, and so those school districts that receive that half a credit per student, they also receive the state safety fund. Is that correct? Sorry, I didn't mean to make you go back and forth. You're getting your steps in today.
Madam Chair, that would be correct if they are enrolled. If it is an elective course, they would be counted as whatever FTE they are enrolled in the public school, plus any applicable weightings. And then this is a separate form of state aid that has been in statute for a very long time. I'd have to double check. And then it would be, it's a separate form of state aid outside of the main school finance formula.
Okay, and so that $130 roughly per high school student of funding, that's regardless of whether they took it in the summer or during the daytime?
Madam Chair, that's correct. It is just if they took it during the previous school year.
Okay. I think also please verify for school districts, if the student takes it in the summer, do they get that half credit? And I assume you're going to have to go back and check on that.
Madam Chair, that would depend on the school district and how they offer it, whether or not it's an extracurricular thing or if it's within like a summer school type of situation.
I'm seeing that we have a couple of issues here. I think we probably need a little bit of time to think about it. We do have a motion where we did approve the amendment, but I don't know, committee, are you ready to take action on this bill today, or do you want to get additional information from the Department of Education? Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm thinking about Senator Diedrich's question earlier and trying to understand would there not be a fiscal note to this if their community colleges are not being paid now, but then they will be. It seems as though we should have some idea as to how much that would cost. And again, I guess what I'm hearing just now from the conferee is that whether a high school student chooses to take driver's ed in their school, or if they do or do not offer the program, that student could take it at the community college. It would be paid to one of the institutions either way, and it'd still be the same price. Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm going to try and explain it this way.
Okay.
So each year, there's a pie, and it's about 1.4 million is what Mr. Hess shared with us. And then what they do is they divide it by the number of students from the public school districts and the accredited non-public school districts that offer driver's ed. So you take that pie and you divide it by the number of participants. If the community college language is put in, keep in mind we have a couple of school districts in Johnson County that stopped providing driver's ed in the summer or during the day. So the community college is providing that service. The only thing they receive at this time is whatever tuition the student pays. They don't receive any portion of the state safety fund. So when school districts stop providing the program, that 1.4 million is there are just fewer students to divide it by, so that's how the rate goes up. So if the community college were to be added, there's still the fund of roughly 1.4 million. It just gets divided by adding the public school districts, the accredited private school districts, and those students participating from the community colleges. Follow-up, Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So that does help. Thank you for that explanation. But something struck me that you said, in addition to the student paying tuition to the school for being able to take this course, but if they're in the high school, they're not having to pay to take the course, correct?
I don't know if any kid that takes it in the summer that doesn't pay, getting back to paying for my kids, they paid tuition. We paid tuition for them to take it in the summer with no knowledge of any funding coming from the state safety fund.
And was this through the high school or through the community college?
Through the high school. So I think it kind of gets back to what Senator Erickson said, where some school districts dropped it because they were unable to make money, make a profit off of it.
Thank you.
So committee, what is your pleasure? Do you want to take action on this? Do you want to wait for some additional information? What additional information in specific would you like to receive? Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. After hearing some of the extra information from the excellent questions here, I would prefer that we hold off on taking any action on this just yet. And I also would like to know, since it was stated that we've seen a significant drop in the number of students that are taking driver's ed, what has that done to traffic violations or, fatalities and that thing for that teen age group? That would be interesting to know if the lack of driver's ed is causing more traffic accidents.
Well, I know we've heard that the Highway Patrol has ticketed more people than ever at speeds exceeding 90 miles an hour during COVID. And they don't attribute it to driver's ed, they attribute it to COVID. And when people get out on that highway, fewer people on the roads, and they just put the pedal to the metal. So I don't know that we can necessarily make the link of that. We just know that instead of the typical 11.5 or to 12,000 students per year, with COVID, we're down to 8,000. Some of that may be to employment issues and having discretionary funds to pay for kids to take driver's ed. Some of it could also simply be that close contact in a car at the time while we're in the midst of COVID. So you would like more information just from an enrollment standpoint? And then we'll see what we can get from Highway Patrol as far as tickets for people 18 years and under. I don't know that we can make a direct correlation. We might try. Senator Sykes, did you have a request?
Actually, I have a question, if possible, because I know driver's ed is getting harder to get in, and even those slots on schools, community college, I've been on a waiting list for those. If someone from the community college, maybe Johnson County Community College, because I know they have a robust program, do you see this making it possible to have even more slots available for driver's ed if you got this reimbursement? And with a motorcycle and those others that you do get info, do you see a difference in the tuition on those? Thank you.
Madam Chairman, Dick Carter with Johnson County Community College. The answer to the question, I think, is we believe that it brings community colleges into the same areas of the four other areas that are in statute if we were to be added as a public institution. With regard to the cost, I think that the option exists to reduce the cost to the participant that is signed up for driver's education. And this would be the only area, I think, that we're not receiving that part of that safety fund. So that's the intent, is to bring us into the same area, reclassifying the college so that the criteria for driver's ed removes us from the inappropriate classification as a commercial institution.
Thank you.
I'm going to call on Senator Erickson to make sure we're clear on what your request is for additional information.
Thank you, Madam.
And this is directed toward the Department of Ed.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to know how many schools are offering driver's education during the day as an elective, and therefore they're getting FTE for that course versus those that offer it as a summer or outside of the normal school day and are not getting an FTE.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Straub, did you have a request?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not to throw one more criteria in here, one more thing, but I also think that sometimes, I know that taking driver's ed will sometimes give you a discount on your insurance. And I would also be curious to see what insurance rates have done for student drivers, basically young drivers.
So you're wanting to know what the differential is for a student driver that takes driver's ed versus doesn't?
Yeah, basically, kind of probably over the last, I think Mr. Hess said that the decline in enrollment happened around the recession. So around 2008, they saw a decline in enrollment from around 15,000 students clear down to, what do you say, we're just over 8,000 students now. I don't think population has declined that much, but that's a significant drop. That's almost half of the students that they had just 15 years ago. So I would guess that either there's not a big incentive for either the student to take the class, or the school, like Senator Erickson said, is not making money off of it. I think there's a number of things at play here, and I'd like to identify what it is so that I have no problem with spending money on safety and providing education to students for driver safety. But if we're just throwing money at something for schools to make money, and it's not improving safety and it's not improving enrollment, then why are we doing it?
So would you like some background information on the state safety fund as well, Senator Straub? Yes, I'm seeing that as a yes. Okay. And
Sure, that was going to be my question as well. Can research tell us what
okay.
revenue stream there is on the safety fund? Is it funding anything else? Is there an excess balance there? If so,
Is your microphone on?
I don't have it up.
There we go.
Can they give us some data on the fund over the last 60 months or so? What other revenue stream, or where else is it funding? What else does it fund? Anything like that. So, thank you.
All right, and Senator Dietrich.
As long as we're collecting data. So it was never my experience that we made any money off of driver's education. The safety fund, what would be good would be to hear from KSDE as they audit the safety fund and driver's education in different school districts. What are those dollars being spent on? Because we spent ours, just as a point of information, on leasing the cars, on paying the additional insurance for the student drivers, on paying the salary of the instructors. And they're getting harder and harder to fund because not everybody wants to teach driver's ed. It's not the most interesting class to teach. So I think how those dollars are spent would be important to know as well. If you can just give us maybe some information on that. Thank you.
So, John Hess, I know you're happy to be back in committee. I think one of the things that we need from the Department of Education is if you can get us a snapshot of those 1, 2, 3A, the 4A, the 5A, the 6A, as far as what it is that they put together to be able to offer driver's ed. I'm assuming it's a combination of things. They're counting on the state safety fund. They're counting on whatever it is they charge for tuition, and this would be for summer students. And then what other areas are they pulling money from their budgets? So committee, yes, Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, the longer we sit here, the more we're going to want. So one thing that I would also like for us to look at is it was stated that this isn't necessarily limited to K-12 or high school age students, that it could be any age student. So do we have any idea how many students that would potentially be that do not have their license, and what that would do to the overall per pupil funding of this if we were to add college students or beyond?
I believe that was in the original testimony. But I don't know if that was perhaps just an answer to a question as opposed to the actual testimony. So, Mr. Carter, if you can get that from Johnson County Community College, or do you have that?
Dick Carter, Johnson County Community College. If I'm not mistaken, I think Mr. Hess maybe provided those numbers that were specific to Johnson County Community College. It was the 900 number and the it was 814 for fiscal year 20 and 905 for fiscal year 21. And I know that it would be our
For the
intent.
high school.
Those were
for the
high
high
school.
school.
And it would be our intent that that would be the only group that we would be recapturing money from that safety transportation fund.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair, but
Erickson.
it's my understanding that that's not what the bill says. It could be any student. Am I not understanding that correctly?
That would be a correction or an additional amendment that would be needed. Okay, so we'll note that. Committee, I think we'll have to spend a little bit of time working on this. I anticipate, let's see, here's Monday, I think if we could, within the next couple days, get the background information from research as well as from the Department of Education, that would be helpful. Committee, I'm going to pull us away from Senate Bill 215. We do not have a motion on the bill itself, though we did add an amendment. At this time, unfortunately, we've only got 12 minutes left, but Mr. Hendricks, can you start guiding us through the foster care report card? If you want to glean anything about driver's ed, jump right in there.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Scott Hendricks. I'm the Director of Permanency for DCF in Kansas. I appreciate the opportunity to present to you information regarding the 2022 legislative session education report card for children in foster care. The report encompasses the 2020 and 2021 school year. I also would like to acknowledge the appreciation for the Kansas State Department of Education and their partnership and their efforts to develop the report. Ensuring educational stability and positive outcomes for education for children in foster care is a high priority for DCF. We try to reflect this through policy, practice, and applicable law. As all know here, that this annual report was originated through a governor's executive order 20-53 in July of 2020 and was codified in statutes last session. DCF and education have worked together over recent years through the Education Stability for Children in Foster Care Work Group. We believe that the requirement of the foster care report card has spotlighted and re-energized this group. The group has grown in membership and meets more frequently. They used to meet quarterly, now they meet on a monthly basis. Membership includes obviously DCF and ks.gov personnel, the Kansas Association of School Boards, and educational coordinators at all 4 child welfare case management providers, as well as other stakeholders. Monthly meetings are held to analyze data provided by ks.gov to determine how we can drive further improvements. Also, the group will review specific cases and cover various topics related to education of foster care students. They will coordinate sharing of information with other school-related agencies and programs, such as the Kansas Jobs for America's Graduates, KJAG, Kansas Mental Health Advisory Council, and Families Together. This is the second presentation of the annual report. It's anticipated and expected that this report will continue to improve and strengthen with the insight provided from this group. The 2021 school year report reflects differences in outcome achievements for children who are in foster care and children who are considered all students. So it's a side-by-side comparison of children in foster care versus all students attending schools. We understand there's much work ahead as we continue to identify and understand factors influencing these outcomes. The group looks to identify successes and gaps in systems and supports for those students who have been affected by foster care. A data dive was done into the initial report, the 2019-2020 report, to identify what further may be needed and included in this report. At the suggestion of the work group and additional stakeholders, this version offers expanded explanation for calculations to better comprehend how this data is extrapolated. It also includes additional data points such as attendance rate, chronic absenteeism, and suspension and expulsions. Some of the noted points from the second report include the percentage of students experiencing foster care who graduate with a diploma in 4 years. It's currently 26.9 points lower than all students. While that number is still high, it is a slight increase from the initial report, which was 28 points lower. Graduation with a diploma in 4 years by race of students reflects foster students who identify as white experience the greatest differential. Children in foster care are just under 60%. All students are just over 90, so it's approximately a 30% difference there. Attendant rates for students in foster care versus all students, there's a 3.2% difference, foster care being 3.2% less. Chronic absenteeism is much higher at 14.6% difference. The dropout rate for youth in foster care remains 4.2 points higher than all students. Additionally, the report captures a breakdown of standardized assessment scores by level of achievement and race, and it also notes an uptick in the use of mental health services in schools. Much has been learned from the developing of this report, obviously, as we continue to work for continuity in education and strong outcomes for children in foster care. Based on the first report, we've implemented changes in practices and procedures. Some of those steps that we have taken include, I mentioned the work group has been intensified to make data-informed decisions to drive best practices. Foster care case management agencies continue to engage and build relationships with local school districts. CMP agencies ensure that education enrollment form is completed within 3 days of a student in foster care moving, so that the receiving district and school may know the 2 prior schools as part of the record transfer. Educational coordinators for the CMPs work directly with schools to ensure timely enrollment, provide transportation and other education advocacy matters. It's also noted that ksde has a system in place for school to share records as well. As part of the education plans that were developed by case management providers last year, data is captured on the number of moves and the number of moves that required a school change and enrollment form. DCF also tracks success factor measures such as same school attendance and grade promotion within those schools. DCF is in the process of implementing placement stability team decision-making. It's a process where all parties will meet, sit at the same table, and discuss a move with the child before that move happens. Part of that includes best interest decisions regarding education. It's about halfway implemented throughout the state. We're anticipating that will have some positive effects on education as well. The number of youth in foster care has decreased and is now right at 6,500. In addition to this rate, placement stability remains a focus of DCF and CMPs. That rate is currently at 6.1 per 1,000 days in care, where the national performance rate or outcome is 4.4. So we're still working toward that. One barrier that we've experienced that the group has noted is expulsions. That's one reason it was asked to be added to the report. We have foster children who may move or may be put into foster care who have been expelled from a school. It's been noted that some districts where that child is moving to will not accept the child due to the expulsion, particularly if it's a year-long expulsion. Some will accept that, some will not. However, that has had an impact on placement stability and has limited some placement options for children. So while we appreciate the opportunity the report presents to continue dialogue, have further conversations on how to improve this outcome or improve all outcomes, we look forward to creating more meaningful reports so the conversations can occur at a local level as well. We're committed to, a full collaboration with all parties involved. We believe we'll take a technical approach with the data analysis to continue to drive policies and best practices for everyone. While also the group is looking at exploring and researching potential solutions for more adaptive problems and barriers at both the state and local level. Some of those being the impact of trauma or grief and loss on the foster care population and how does that impact learning. Also the workforce shortages and the potential ramifications or impact that has. And of course, COVID and virtual learning. That's all captured in this year's report too. So the report was presented at this month's Stability Work Group. So they'll be taking some deeper dives and looking into how those impacted the report. So with that being said, it remains our objective to elevate these outcomes. So a lot of work to be done. We fully acknowledge that. And I appreciate the opportunity to go through this very quickly, and I will take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
I think at this point of time, I have two quick questions. The first one is, we do have Mike Fonkert that's here from Kansas Appleseed. Mike, if we were to continue this on another date, would you be able to attend and go through your testimony? Okay. So my question is specifically about the testimony that you provided us. On page 4, where you have the chart of the state assessments, level 1 is the lowest level, correct? So even though it appears at the top, that's the lowest performance level.
Correct.
Okay. So when we look at that, we know that in math, language arts, and science, in every one of those categories, more than 50% of our kids in foster care are below grade level and are in the lowest level of assessment. Is that correct? Okay. So at best, we're at 2% in the highest level for math, 1.88% for English language arts, and almost 4% for science. And those are foster kids and their performance at the highest level, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Usually we see that flipped the other way. And so, committee, Senator Sykes, you have a question? Okay. We are going to continue this. I know that you'll be available, and I know that Doug Boleen is here as the Assistant Director of Special Ed. So we will continue this because the report card for our foster care kids deserves more than 12 or 13 minutes. We'll have one last quick question and then we will adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if you need to talk about this tomorrow, that's fine. Working with constituents who have foster kids, specifically like trying to work on an IEP or things, a lot of times that request has to be signed by their biological families. Has there been any discussion in the stability work group or best practices of how that either the case manager or foster parents can do that so it's not having to go through so many hoops? I know a lot of times foster kids, parents don't know where they are because of safety, and trying to make sure they have all of those resources available to them. Is there a way that we can kind of adjust some of these requirements so that we can get them the services that they need without having to go back to those biological parents to sign those forms?
Thank you for that question, Senator. And what I will do is tomorrow I can bring back existing policy and I can check with the team and we can look at what is required, what may be required, and sync code with that, and then see if there are some possible streamlining that we could do in the future.
Yeah, thank you. And if there's anything that we need to do legislatively to make sure that our children who are our most vulnerable are getting those services that they need, I would be interested in that. So thank you.
And let me make it clear, we will not continue this tomorrow because tomorrow we have a hearing on a bill and I don't think we'll have enough time to get through all of that and get back to this. So Cindy and I will make sure that we coordinate with Scott. with Mike as well as Doug for a time that we will be able to give an adequate time to go over this. So we'll let you know, we'll let the committee know, but tomorrow we do have our hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So you have a little bit more time to get that background data. Committee, thank you for your work today. We are adjourned.